Well, good evening and welcome to the Myers Touch and our Design Talk series. It's lovely to have you here with us today. So I'm just getting myself set up, get myself organised, and welcome. If it's your first time with us, you're absolutely welcome to join us tonight. Just set my timer so I don't go over. Tonight's talk will be roughly about 35 to 40 minutes. Could be a little bit less if I talk fast or don't necessarily spend so much time on each side as I've planned. We do, for those of you that are new to us tonight, the series that we've been running now for the last probably couple of years in the studio, and since lockdown we've gone online with our talks. Instead of being monthly, currently every 2 weeks. That may be changed a little bit further, but keep an eye on the emails that we send out, and we'll be telling you all about the projects that we're doing and the design talks that are coming up. So tonight's talk, which is called Do Designers Play It Safe? It's a really interesting subject for me, and hopefully you'll find it interesting as we take you through the presentation. I'm going to quickly just touch on who the Myers Touch are for about a minute, just so those that you knew. And then really I'm going to do a little bit of wordy stuff at the beginning, which is kind of more text-based, and then take you into some projects that we've been working on. But I need to give you all the words and information for the background to put the projects into context. If you've got any problems with hearing or anything, you please use the chat button. It's on the top or the bottom of your screen. Hopefully you'll see that. You're more than welcome just to click onto that anytime. My wife, Helena, who's in the office behind me there, is just keeping an eye on the chat box and will let me know if there's anything that needs to be said. So without further ado, let's crack on. So the Myers Touch, we've been around since about 2003 when we started the business between the two of us as interior design and interior architecture. We did design and build. As you just see here, this is our studio in Winchester, just outside Winchester, very accessible from the motorway and easy parking, as you can see, which is quite unusual. Just on the right-hand side is just a few of the design awards that we've been delighted to win over the years. And this picture here is the inside of our studio. As you can see, we won Kitchen Showroom of the Year a couple of years ago, which is actually quite a tough-fought competition to participate in and to win. We've been, well, the only kitchen company in England for the last 3 years that have been up for Kitchen Retailer of the Year and Kitchen Showroom of the Year, which we're obviously delighted about. It's an accolade that just trying to the next slide. Right, here we go. So, designers, do they play it safe? Well, that's a really interesting question. So I think the first question to ask really, well, who is the designer? Who am I talking about when I talk about this whole concept? Well, the first thing which may surprise you is actually everyone is a designer. And that's a really interesting thing, because I think over the years, we've really seen, the recent years particularly, a development of a number of TV programs that like Grand Designs, like George Clark's Small Spaces, 60-minute, 60-minute refresh or something of the house. Those sorts of programs, the reality TV side of that, are some of them inspirational, some a little bit tacky and a bit cheesy, but in essence, the television has really promoted this whole home sector really significant over the years, and the followings and the ratings, obviously these programs make it very worthwhile for TV companies to invest in that. And what they're doing is they're training, equipping and empowering everybody to move in some form into design. The DIY market is obviously has grown significantly over the years. I read an article recently that said the global spend on DIY sector was something around 32 billion US dollars in 2013, and in 2019, so that's only last year, it's 144 billion, which is a significant increase. And a lot of people now, you go into DIY shops, there's some fantastic design ideas there that can really help you and empower you to make good choices. The magazine market, the whole sector now, if you wander into Smith's, there's a significant chunk of home type magazines, from kitchen, bedrooms and bathrooms to Grand Designs magazine to home and interiors. It's kind of, the list goes on, and they're really helpful, and there's some amazing help within those magazines, all designed to empower people to learn how to design. Obviously, with the internet, which has changed all of our lives, particularly since lockdown, online design tools, you can now log on to a number of sites. You can design your own kitchen, move the boxes around, as it were, place them where you want them to be, test it out, measure it out, and all in the comfort of your own home. And of course, there's lots of online help available for that. But I want to just break this down into what I call the types of designers that we're dealing with. And there's no wrong or right here. It's just how I see it and how I view the world. So the first type of a designer is what I call a copy designer. This is a great place if you are really quite inexperienced, or you just don't have the time to invest or the money to invest in that. You can go along to Dulux, for example, and you can even go on their website now, and they will suggest wall colors, wallpaper colors, and you can actually buy pre-made room design configurations. Laura Ashley, when they were around, had a whole kind of suite of wallpapers, furniture, materials, carpets that could actually be pulled together with a pre-made design. And really, you really are cookie cutting that and placing it into your room. It's a fantastic way to very easily and very quickly be confident of the design that you want and where it goes. The next type of designer I call the hobbyist or the amateur designer. These are people who really do enjoy interiors, colors, design, and be able to do their own schemes in their own house and sometimes for friends. And maybe in another life they might be a designer themselves, an interior designer, or maybe it's too late in life, or they're actually better at something else that probably pays better as well. So it's a really great place, and these sorts of people, they have lots of time because it's a hobby for them. They get energized by doing it. They can research, they can go into Pinterest, House, lots of design things, search the internet, collect magazines, build their ideas out, trust them, and do that. And it really ends up as very well researched and very well looked at. I put in here as another type of designer is what I call the builder designer. This is really what I call the tradesperson. I've bumped into many builders and carpenters over the years who are designing things on site for clients live then and there. And because they're experienced, because they've been in the game for a long time, they've seen lots of things. And I would say that for a basic level of design, they can do a really fantastic job at doing that. Now, those of you who've been on my talks previously will know a lot more about what I think about kitchen planners, and do that as a differentiator, what I call a kitchen designer. A kitchen planner is someone who helps facilitate your ideas into a plan and into design. And I think there's a significant part of the kitchen design, bathroom design market that fits into this category quite nicely and quite successfully. And then, of course, the last thing is what I call the professional designer. These are people that have gone to university, they've spent many years training, and they've been in the industry for some time. And it's obviously the architects, interior design, also interior architects as well, which is a blend of those two skills of interior architecture, of interior design and architecture itself. In the Myers Touch here, I've got two interior architects, a spatial designer and an interior designer, all qualified to be able to support our clients. So let me talk about what I mean by safe design. It's a really interesting use of the term, and it came out from an article that I actually did as a blog that then went onto LinkedIn, that ended up with me then being interviewed for the kitchen and bathroom sector. So let me just talk to you what I mean by safe design. The first thing I really want to talk about is following the architecture or the design of the building. So, for example, if you have a farmhouse, you put a farmhouse kitchen in. If you have a listed building, you put a listed kind of authentic kind of character type building, working with the ceilings or the beams and create that sort of style. Classic kitchen in a classic building, traditional and contemporary in contemporary. In one sense, you can't really go wrong by following the architecture. Obviously, you can go wrong in design by putting the wrong type of thing in. But if you're sensible and you're clear, you can come up with some really nice things that work really well, and I'm sure would be very enjoyable to watch and see. The next thing is what I call copying. It's like a hairstyle. My wife always, well, not always, but will often come to me when she's thinking about her hair or popping off to the hairdressers, and showing me a picture. I really like this hairstyle, but it won't look right on my face. And this is one of the challenges that safe design can be when you're copying. You can see something that looks really good in its context, in its environment, but when you actually try to place it in your space, it just doesn't look right. And I've seen that done with a fireplace before in a particular project some years ago, where they'd seen a particular fireplace that looked absolutely stunning, but when they actually put it in the house, it just wasn't right, and it didn't feel right. And it was actually a fairly costly mistake at the end of the day, to be able to do that. I put here too simple, and what I mean by too simple is sometimes you can oversimplify design and how it works. You can also overcomplicate it as well, but actually really good design is not simple. So therefore, if you're going to this place where you're trying to make it too safe, you actually try and go simple as possible, and therefore you end up a place of safety rather than in another place. The other thing I've talked here about following guidelines without actually understanding the essence or the core behind them. Guidelines are fantastic, but they are just that. They, at times, need to be broken and need to be tested. So a very simple one that everybody would know was the kitchen triangle between the hob, the fridge, and the sink. As long as you got that in there, then everything would be hunky-dory. And actually, that can work, but it's what I call safe design, rather than testing that or breaking that or pushing that through a thing. The other thing which is safe design is what I call, it's the opposite of actually kind of what I've written there, but ideas that are predefined. This is where you come into a design situation that you want to do, and you have a number of predefined ideas that you're unwilling to move on or to adapt to create something better. And therefore what happens is your own ideas can push you into a place of safety and constraint, and you don't end up necessarily with all that you hoped for. It's interesting on this because the whole aspect of this use of wow design, it's this whole position and desire to really create something that when you walk in, you are somehow moved by what you've created. That actually is not safe design. It's much more than that. So the next thing is not consider the interiors architecture. When I'm talking about interior architecture, I'm talking about when you look at your building, if your architecture is wrong, then your kitchen or your living space may necessarily not work out as you hoped. And therefore, if you don't push back into the architecture, if you don't test the architecture and make sure it's right, then actually you can end up with squashing something in. And so many times, I can't tell you how many projects over the years I have changed the architecture. Even things like structural engineering, where I remember a project and they had this post in the middle of the room. And I said to the client, look, I don't understand why that's there. You could design the structure this way. And I suggested how it was done. And I said, look, go back to the structural engineer and ask them whether it can be changed. And the structural engineer said, yeah, that's fine. Absolutely no problem at all. So there's therefore testing the architecture can be really fundamental to having a successful outcome for your project. If you don't do that, then you end up with something that potentially is quite safe. Design, I think best design comes out of collaborating with those around you, and particularly as a design team here on some of our projects where they're particularly challenging, or we have to really work through a space. We will sit down as a design team and we will collaborate on the design internally to get the best design for the client, and we will brainstorm ideas. Nothing is off the table. And that has created some of the most amazing outcomes for our clients over the years. But also collaborating, which we do with other designers, architects, interior designers. Clearly the client themselves, the best design always comes out in working with the client as well in this whole process. So I wanted to put this picture up because this was actually portrayed as a wow kitchen that some, I won't tell you where it came from, but I just picked it off a website. And I wanted to kind of mention a few things here because they followed some basic guidelines or rules here. The sink in front of the window is a rule that many clients talk to us about. I'm obviously it's a bit disappointed I haven't got the other side of the kitchen because there's a thing called a C shape or a G shaped kitchen. This could be a G shape or it could be a C shape. If you think, obviously we've got the C that runs through here, but actually potentially if the kitchen comes up this side as well, which I obviously can't see, it would be a G shaped kitchen. That's another rule. The sink, the hob, and probably the fridge over here somewhere creates the kitchen triangle. But without being disingenuous to what here, for me as a designer, there's some things that I really don't like about this kitchen. It's not a particularly great example of a kitchen, but I want to show you things that that I pick up. The first thing is this is a really low cost extractor. It would be much nicer to actually build that into the furniture here and to run it all the way through and create a much sleeker feel. There's too many cabinets here, and what you're doing is you're overpowering the room with these massive, great big boxes. And because it's a darker color rather than a lighter color, it really impacts the space. The lighting isn't working right for me because when you look at the lighting, you've got the light not flowing properly through the space. You've got the same light fitting the same size on different units. The plugs on the wall aren't centered in the units in creating the right space. This space over here that you can just see, oops, where the filler is over here is reaching the top, not allowing the handleless profile come through. The lines that are running through here. So there's lots of things about this that have followed guidelines and rules, but actually in my mind, they've ended up with something that emotionally is functional and dead. And by no means would I ever call this a wow kitchen. So how do we avoid this aspect of safe design? What are the things that we need to do as designers and obviously also for yourself about creating these spaces? Well, the first thing that I have alluded to is test the architecture that's around you. I've got some examples coming up in picture form in a few moments, really after this section, that will kind of put some more space to this. But I had a really interesting project. We were doing a home. It was actually a developer, but it was his own personal home. And he'd got a very narrow space. And trying to create an island and units off the wall was really difficult. So actually what we did is I suggested that we create a niche into the wall that actually would build a small extension on the side of the building to put all the tool units in, because we didn't really have the space to do what he wanted. And actually, coincidentally, this wall was built into the bank anyway, so it wasn't a problem. And he did that, and he ended up with the units flush with the wall and created the space. If we're not tested the architecture, that wouldn't work out. Challenge the ideas that are around you. It's very interesting how many or how often we have clients come in here and they've come in here having researched quite intensively, not just various companies, but they've gone out and done some due diligence on what they like. They've selected the products they like. They have ideas. They're coming into that. Within that thought process that they've gone through, they may have made mistakes or flaws or have missed something really intrinsic to get a better outcome and a better design. So in our design processes and in our design meetings with our clients, we test all the ideas that they have and make sure there isn't a better option, or we understand why they want to do that. We spend every single day of our working life in this sector, and we understand some different ways of approaching things. Sometimes that may be much better way of approaching it, or maybe not. Take a risk. Well, there's a thing. It's really interesting when we have certain clients that come in. They've sometimes been around the houses. They kind of find us at the end of their travel sometimes. And I remember a lady who came to me and said, "I've been to 5 kitchen companies. I'm at the end of everything. I'm kind of fed up with it, and you're my last hope, basically." And what's happening is a designer has to take you to a place that there's some element of risk. Now, you need to slightly feel risky, and we'll come on to this a little bit in a minute, but taking risks with things appropriately, this is considering it well, not just throwing yourself out there and randomly doing something, but actually using risk as a real motivator to pull things. So therefore, that really nicely leads into the introduction of ideas, ideas that excite you, that motivate you. I mean, it's really interesting. We find often when a client's gone in for planning permission and they've been accepted, the first place they go to is the kitchen company, because it's the most exciting part of the house. So we love that. We love passion and we love excitement about what we do. But also you need ideas that unsettle you. It's slightly linked to risk, but actually, you know, if you've come to the Myers Touch and you walk out with what you came in with, then we haven't done our job properly. We have to move you to a place that you couldn't have gone yourself. So avoiding safe design is not going to the comfortable and to the initial size. The use of materials and adventurous materials is really interesting. We have a whole lot of covers which you can't see, which are over to the side here. And so many different materials are accessed to sprayed on metal finishes, to well, we're using wallpaper in kitchens, we're using glass, different glass finishes, different stones, different types of stones, all sorts of different lighting effects. And you'll see some of these as we go through the projects. But the use of adventurous materials can really help you if you know what you're doing, to avoid this whole safe design thing. And of course, I've got to say, is why I put a smiley face at the end. Use a qualified designer that really understands the market, what is needing to be done, and how it actually should come together. So let me run you through some examples of projects that we've done. So firstly, this is a lovely project that we did in Surrey. You'll see at the bottom, the just down here, the one that I'm actually talking about. This is called Challenging the Ideas, that the client and the architect had. So when we walked into this project, I tried to find the before photo for this because they've got a lovely extension, and this is a complete transformation of what they had. But the architect and the client had planned the kitchen where the sofa area is. And I had to challenge that. And actually it took, I mean, this looks beautiful, but the kitchen would have been in the wrong place if it was in that area. And I had to talk it through them. And actually I did 2 designs and I showed them it in visualization to actually explain to them how it would work and how it would draw. But this couple here have a big entertainment thing. They love people coming around. They have a group of friends. They come around on a regular basis to dine. And we spent a lot of time in going through the whole flow and moving their idea set. And what was so beautiful about this project is when we actually went to see it, we walked in and the client was jumping up and down on the spot because she so loved her space. And it is one of the most beautiful projects we've done. And the transformation of what they were going to do to where they ended up is really key. And the success of this project was in challenging actually what the architect has said, which is obviously another professional designer, but also what the client expectation was of the whole of this project. This one is what I call adventurous materials. And this is really interesting because we actually did this for TV personality. And the aspect of this which is using some core products, and that's basically what's running through here is stainless steel. This is a teak finish. We're using white and we're using grey laminate through the project. And when you look at this, the whole concept that you get with this, which is the feeling into the room, if you can use your imagination a bit, if you can see that as a Welsh dresser, it has a soft feel into the space as a dresser, rather than actually internally, the kitchen is actually a very contemporary, quite harsh. But if you can see, we've got running through the whole of the space there, we've got teak, we've got brick, we've got stainless steel, and we've got white and grey laminate finishes. You've got the white on the back here on this back shelf unit, which actually goes to a wine room. And then you have the grey and the stainless steel running through on the fireplace. So the use of different materials here created a really lovely space to do that. And I've got another one of these. There's some overlap here, but I'm really kind of talking about the main aspects of how they come together. This one is called Testing the Architecture. And now this was a really interesting project because we were invited to actually to do a competitive quote for this project. And when we'd actually coming to see it, this was a house being built, again, by a developer. This is down in Hiltonbury, if you know the area around Winchester. And when we walked into the room, right down in this far corner here, where you can see this dark color here, hopefully you can see my, Helena, can you see my mouse working? Can you see my mouse? Yeah, you can see my mouse. Yeah, great. Just want to make sure you can see it, otherwise it's not very helpful. This whole area around here, they had a big utility space. I'm going to move on to the other room. So you can see the opposite end. There was a big, basically square room where they had a utility and small pantry in. Now this house, when I walked in, had all the brick walls up, the windows in, and plastered. And I was asked to give a competitive quote on somebody else's design, which I did because they were friends of friends, but it's not normally our way of approaching things. When I'd actually spoken to the client, he asked me a question that said, if you'd been involved in this project earlier on, would you change anything? And I actually said to him, I said, I can answer that question for you, but what I'm going to answer you is going to cost you more money. He said, that's fine, don't worry about that. And it would cost him more money because he had to take out the utility room they'd already built and block up the window that they'd already put into place. That's why it was going to cost them extra. And when I actually, this couple came to our dining club a few months ago, and he said to me, he said, Keith, every time I walk into our space, you saved us from making a major architectural mistake in our room. And you look at this and it's beautiful and it all comes together, and it's a nice design. It's fairly simple. There's some few hidden things in there which I won't go into today. But our testing the architecture, your testing the architecture to make sure it's right, completely transformed the whole space that was available. This is another test the architecture. I quite like this. Sometimes we work with all sorts of different types of architects, from what we call, I don't know if you know, but architecture comes into three categories, really, what they call part 1, part 2, and part 3. Part 3 are your senior, fully fledged architects. Part 2 are architects in training. And part 1s are more kind of architectural technicians, and they've done kind of the basic level of architecture. And for consumers, you don't always know necessarily what you're dealing with. But when you're dealing with sometimes with the lower part 1, part 2 architects, they tend to design the exterior of the building, but they don't necessarily consider the interior of the architect, the room and the architecture itself. It varies across the board, so I'm doing a huge, as I kind of say, generalization, but to give you some idea. So what we often are placed with projects where they have just had kitchen designs or layouts done really for building regs and for nothing else. And I'm just going to move you on to the next picture, because this is kind of showing you from the far corner. Now this is a really big space. You've got this lovely lounge area in the corner, separated through the dining center off to the right there, and then the kitchen. But what's really interesting, and the wine area, obviously, what's really interesting about this project is that when we came in, we had one big L-shaped room. And what you can see there of the kitchen was about 3 meters further back into an area. And you can just about see, if you look where these ovens are, to the left-hand side of the ovens, you'll see there's like a space under this, because this area here is a pocket door system. And when you open this up, what I've designed at the back here is a utility room, which is actually behind here, a boot room, which is directly behind here, and a pantry area, which runs the whole length of this space. So by testing the architecture and changing the shape of what the client or the client's architect had originally designed, ended up with a significant size room, but some beautiful storage and space. It was a real delight to work for this client because they really valued what we did and really enjoyed the whole design process. So this is another one about playing safe. It's about the introduction of ideas. And there's 2 ideas here, really. The client here was a big chef. They actually run a company called Hampshire Foods, which do Indian food as a kind of a catering thing. Really lovely couple, and they allowed us to introduce ideas they hadn't considered of. The first one, as you can see, which is why I've focused on this whole open shelf area, this curved section going around. Now, behind this area here is the utility room and pantry area. Now, by creating this open space here and curving the wall, it hides and creates something they hadn't actually considered, because they just originally considered just having a utility room and a kind of little jutted out square bit. But by building this around, we created this whole space. You can see now the door on the left-hand side here is the access sliding pocket door into pantry either side, and then the utility on the far section. So that was a first kind of architectural, I suppose, idea that we introduced, and they never thought they could get a pantry in. So that was quite an exciting thing for them to have. And the next thing was the first and only time I've ever done this. This was kind of introducing the idea of just rather having the breakfast bar just running all the way through, was actually to run it right the way down and then right the way along to create that shape. So you can see obviously on the side here, this done here. Now this was introduction of a new material because we've never done this before. This whole island style, I've never done this before, and I've never done it since actually. So this is a beautiful walnut bar, all connected all the way through. Then we have a glass, which is printed on the back with a Japanese wallpaper to give, when you actually get close up to it, it's this, have you ever been to Japan where they have these kind of opaque screens that are in like a very kind of white, kind of off-white clear thing with veining going through it? Well, that's what you're seeing here. And then the light that washes down on the glass to give this effect. We did want to do opaque glass itself with light in behind, but it was just too much cost at the end of the day to do something like this. So this was a really lovely design and use of unique materials that we've never done before. There's a few other things architecturally, but I'll move on for the sake of time. This was a really fun project to do. When we work with other professional designers, I really like that because we have a very different conversation and they know what we're trying to achieve. With this particular project, we were working for an architect who works for Foster's in London. And Foster's is one of the top UK architects, and he's a fantastic architect himself. And what you can kind of see on this grey floor is, or the front and back, is a 400-year-old farmhouse. This is actually in South Wonston area, just north of Winchester, with a contemporary extension that connects the new and the old. And you can see that on the floor level. And the client had actually already designed his kitchen, but completely within the confines of the existing building shape here in the old part. And if you can just about see over here, you can see this kind of light color. This is actually a well built into the ground. It's original well, how they used to draw their water, obviously, right in the center of the kitchen space that we had to work around. And I gave him 3 different ideas for laying this out, but this was my favorite because what it did, or what it does, is it breaks the connection, breaks the architectural line between the two, and it really pulls the new and the old together as one coherent space. So by putting this all the way out here with, this is kind of extra storage in the coffee machine, so you can operate in the coffee, and the fridge is here for much. You can get a coffee without going into the kitchen, the Aga at the back here, and then all the oven appliances down the side. And then when you look from the other direction, you can see the extension all the way through, and you can just catch a closer glimpse of how we dealt with the well in the middle there. We wanted to again keep access to it. So by having this complete open thing with this floating end grain chopping board area between the two was a really beautiful way of putting together this whole thing and challenging the ideas of someone who was really a top architect. And it was a pleasure to work with him, and a very enjoyable process. Taking a risk. I mean, this is one of my kind of favorite projects, really, because we had a client who actually said to us he wanted a boat in his kitchen. And I've used this, if you've been on to my design talks, you would have seen this come up quite a bit. But it is a really great way of really testing things and pushing the boundaries of it. I don't think I'll ever do anything like this again. It's just a one-off, completely unique style and shape. And actually, it's a delight now. We're working on this. This was the client's second home. And we're working on their current project, which is a new build house on the Isle of Wight, which again is stretching things in a slightly different way. Introduction of ideas here, which is it's kind of similar to the boat in one sense of using a kind of a curved wood shape. But there's a few things on here that we've introduced. The first thing is we split the worktop. On the very first project I showed you, that had a split worktop in the dark and light stone, but here we've done a slightly different colored stone and just followed the shape on the inside of that and then brought it around on the outside to give a different style. But they had a separate dining table, which was taking up quite a lot of space. Now, by connecting them together, what this has enabled us to do is to create a larger island and utilize the space in a better way. So they can still seat 4 rather than 5, but that 5th person on a seat takes up a lot of space in there. So merging it together and creating that idea to do that. And then on the side here, just on the left-hand side here, there's a little wine fridge, which we actually punched into the cupboard under the stairs to give us a bit of extra depth and style and shape, and obviously just did a build down ceiling to mimic the island itself. So that was great fun. And what was interesting, this was just in a wimpy home with one of the most stunning kitchens I think they probably ever had in their house. Now this was interesting. This was a test the architecture, and there's a few ideas in it, but the leading thing was on here was we were invited to bid for this project, and this door over here was the entrance into the kitchen. The kitchen was a completely closed off space with a wall all the way through, and then you would come down the passageway, which is from the front of the house, down into this space here, which was basically had a small sofa area and this dining room table. And I had this kind of idea to really to break the whole space and link it together, because they were quite frustrated, and we do find this with clients quite a lot, where the family is broken up with someone being in the kitchen and the rest of the family being in another location. So that's really one of the major things that drives the open plan connecting or broken plan style of living. This had a few complications because obviously it's split level. So by opening up, it created the challenge of how we deal with a split level and what we do. So all the back units on the side here sink, and then the hob is on the island. And actually the radiator for this room is actually on the back of the island, which is interesting. And then a little floating area here, which is more for bills for the phone, charging, all that sort of thing, just on the side. And what we did uniquely here is we actually butted the table up. And this is a custom table that we actually had made, but it's permanently fixed to the end here. And this TV unit here rises up and down, so it can be hidden away in the mornings. And it's a really, really beautiful kind of concept where testing the architecture and pushing through and breaking into that space and then working with it, creating the whole split level feel and using the split level to our advantage has created what I think is an exceptional outcome. I think this is the last slide that I've had, that I've got on kind of pictures. This is challenging the ideas. In this particular kitchen, the client came to, this is I think it's a grade 2 listed arts and crafts mansion just outside Romsey. Beautiful building in its own right. And actually the only way that the client could get planning consent was to build a contemporary extension on the side. So he did this, and his brief to us was that he wanted all the ovens and fridges on the back wall. So that's kind of quite simple. But he said he wanted to stand when he's working at this section here and look out, and you can see the glass starting on the far right-hand side. But actually goes out to a full glazed panel running right the way across the whole of the space. He had about 20 acres, so he could stand there in the mornings and he could look out while he's preparing things. And then he said he wanted to sit down at a table and enjoy the view. But he wanted a really significant island as well, space-wise. And actually we came, in a sense, began to compete with the architecture. Now, had we been involved earlier in the project, I would have made his extension 0.5 meter smaller, so 0.5 meter larger, maybe 1 meter larger than what's done. And when we actually went to do this photo shoot, because this was in a national magazine, Kitchens, Bedrooms, Bathrooms magazine, I believe, a few years ago, I asked him if there's anything he would change, and he said he would have made the extension bigger. And I know why, because he hadn't considered the architecture. He just plonked it in and thought it was big enough, but needed to design the inside sometimes you need to design the inside of the building before you design the outside, and then just wrap the outside. Most often people go straight to an architect, wrap the outside round and create what they want outside, and they don't consider the inside. And therefore what you end up with is architecture that actually isn't quite right or isn't working for you. And this was the situation here. So the only way to do what we wanted to do was to actually merge both together. I've never done this concept before. We actually we quoted for a bespoke acrylic table to sit in here, so we didn't block the view or the whole look, but he actually never went ahead with it because he just liked to sit on there, a little oak barley twist table on the corner there, and he'd sit there in the morning and have his coffee and look at the view and read his paper, and actually love what he was doing. So challenging the whole idea here of what he was initially trying to do and how he was trying to create these two separate areas, and fundamentally testing the architecture and some quite quirky stone materials was quite fun. Which is actually, if you look at the worktop, it's a mirror image. The negative of the floor, which is the dark veining and the light veining there. Excuse me. So that's it for tonight. That was my little talk on playing safe design-wise. I'll just come out of the share screen so I can see you all. Here you all are. Lovely to see you. At least someone's else. I feel like I'm talking to myself sometimes. So welcome, everybody. It's been good to have you on tonight. Hope you've enjoyed the time. If you would like to pop on email or chat, if you have any feedback for us, of any ideas, any thoughts, could we do it any better? We'd love to hear from that. If you've been inspired by tonight, please do let us know. So I always love to hear from people if we can do that. I'm not sure what the next design talk is. 2 weeks' time, Helen and myself are on holiday. So watch this space, as it were, with regard to our email set, whether we're going to postpone it or whether we, I'm thinking about roping in some of my other designers to participate in a Q&A type session, but haven't asked them yet, so I can't guarantee that. But hope you've enjoyed tonight, and thank you for joining us, and look forward to hearing from you shortly. All the best. And